Hi everyone, I'm Tushar. I joined Themis in October 2023 as Assistant Director Digital and Process Transformation. I come with 23 years of IT experience, which includes 5 years entrepreneurship and over a decade of management and strategy consulting. What I believe in is to make organizations effective first and efficient next.
Hi, I'm David Barrington. I joined Themis in April 2024. I'm a director in the defence team and I'm currently leading transformation projects in finance and technology for the Singaporean Ministry of Defence and the Armed Forces. My background is military. I'm a former Army colonel and defence consultant, and I've over 35 years experience in defence and government. My focus as part of the team is to bring the knowledge, skills and experience that I've gained to help Themis strengthen Singapore's defence capabilities and to contribute to the development of Singapore as a whole.
Yes, so that's an interesting question. What is agility? Agile and agility are different. If you do a dictionary definition of what agility is, it says ability to respond quickly and easily. So there are two aspects, easy as well as quick. A lot of times currently most of the organizations and leaders latch on to the speed part of it. While speed is important, we forget the easy part of it, the swiftness part of it as well. Let's take an example, like the military unit as an example would do a lot of pre-planning before going onto the front line to fight that war. They would plan the artillery, they would analyze the enemy well enough for their strengths and weaknesses. We would analyze the terrain, communication systems, support systems, whatnot. We would have a strong tactical and strategical ambitions and aims and missions being laid out clearly. Everyone is aligned and they walk onto the front line. As soon as we hit the front line, we all know plans goes for a toss. We have to really adapt on the fly to how the enemy is responding and how the terrain and the weather is responding, right?
Yep.
So that piece of speed and adaptability is one part of it. But imagine if one soldier goes really fast and everyone else is left behind, would that work? Not really. Or let's say because we want to stay in sync and align everyone and move as a one unit, one system, let's say every decision is taken very slowly through all the approval chains or getting all the systems in sync and only then we move. That makes you really slow. The enemy would come and actually take over you already. They would be much more faster than us. So that bit of how to hit the balance is really the key, right? How does it happen or play out in real life organizations, real life enterprises is a lot of autonomy is given to the units. At the same time, there are real-time systems that radiates all the information so that the teams can make their autonomous decisions on the fly quickly. So that empowerment, autonomy and alignment, balancing all of it is where the magic lies.
Okay, I think I'd agree with your broad definition that says, that agility is about the ability to respond effectively, I think, to changing circumstances. And I think as well what we can do is we can actually build in innovation as well. Because I think, by building in innovation, what we're actually doing is trying to be proactive and therefore drive change in the future as well as to responding to current change. And I suppose you ask the question, well, why is that important for defence? And of course, the primary reason is to stay ahead of your enemies.
Correct.
To maintain what we would say the strategic advantage, because if you can do that, then when the worst case scenario comes, you're more likely to win. Now, you might get the impression from this discussion that we're about to have a go at defence, actually, but I would say that in defence of defence is that, we're pretty good at innovation. And if you look back over time, you will see that a number of things that we take for granted today, rocket propulsion, atomic power, the internet, have all come to a greater or lesser extent from requirements driven from defence. Okay, so if we are good at innovation, what is the issue today? And I think that you've alluded to, Tushar, when you mentioned speed. Because actually, when we look out of the window today across across the environment, we see that new technology and new capabilities are ever more accessible, and they're being delivered ever faster. And that's meant that a whole new range of risks from a whole load of different state and non-state actors, particularly in the cyber domain, have suddenly appeared.
Correct.
And of course, defense approaches, as we all know, are struggling to respond and keep up with that. And by the time we do respond, we find that the situation has changed all over again. Okay. So why is it so hard for defense? Well, I think, scale is one of the big issues. Governments are investing billions of dollars, delivering high-tech equipment that takes years to build. And therefore, the risk in terms of time and cost is significant. And that builds in a risk-averse culture to ensure that, the nation gets what it pays for and that governments can justify to its taxpayer that they're getting value for money.
Correct.
And we shouldn't forget the fact that defence in the good times can be seen as a very expensive insurance policy when other competing priorities such as education and health, are competing for the same pot of gold. So I think what I would say is, it's not for want of trying and it's not for want of, vision that defence is struggling in this area. They expend huge efforts every year analysing global trends, working out what the future operating environment is going to look like and how we might prepare ourselves for it. But as you all know, every time you look on the news, you will see that defence is accused of fighting the last war, delivering equipment late and running over budget. So what is it that is the problem? And it's not a new problem. If you look at the UK as an example, we've got a great example back in the 80s, 40 odd years ago, of Nimrod, which was cancelled after the UK had spent over $1 billion. A project just didn't work. Wow. Okay. So yes, it's not a new problem, but if we look at things that are happening in the world now, Ukraine and further afield, then clearly something has got to change. And perhaps that the requirement for that change now is clearer and more pressing than ever. Yeah, so defence across the world, everybody is trying to keep up to date or ahead of the developments in the wider world. And it's not because of lack of trying. We're spending huge amounts of money investing in analysing global trends, trying to forecast the future operating environment and to put ourselves, to prepare ourselves for what is coming in the future. The trouble with that is, is that although we all understand that, that there is a need for a new way to do business, and we need to change some of the practices that perhaps we've been doing traditionally for decades, in order to achieve this, it's proving really quite resilient to change. And that particularly in one area is the procurement area, which is an area that almost every government that I've worked for is constantly looking to optimize.
True.
So if that's a key fundamental sort of area for the future and transformation of defence, and agility is one of those areas that will help us achieve those outcomes, how do you see agility helping us on that journey?
True. Procurement is a classic one, isn't it? So I think you're correct. In what I have been seeing is, especially in defense contracting, they come up with a requirement which is 3 to 5 years vision or outcome, and they try to get absolutely everything written down to the T, all the requirements out there, ask the vendors to actually do their estimation to the T again, even come up with the exact plan and the exact step and the exact timeline for the whole 3 to 5 years per se. Now, we are not fortune tellers, are we? So we don't have that crystal ball which will tell us exactly what will happen for the next 3 to 5 years. People change, technology change, threat situation change, market changes, government changes. So how can we stick to that plan or that recipe, and how can we upfront know what exactly we are going to do? It doesn't work that way. So I think one of the principles I invite governments and public services especially to think about is embracing uncertainty. As soon as we say that we don't know enough and there is no way to figure it out, so let's just embrace the uncertainty, knowing that we don't know, how do we deal with it? And the answer that comes up is just break whatever you want to do in smaller chunks, smaller increments, smaller iterative contracts. Contract for only what you know. To give an example, something that US DoD has already tried and piloted, and something that TMUS is helping Singapore defense ecosystem to pilot it now as we speak, is something called collaborative contracting, wherein we contract for the outcomes which are still 3 to 5 years or even more years than that, more time than that, to achieve that outcome. But the activities and the outputs are not locked in yet. They are locked in, they are defined collaboratively, and they are being locked in very small pieces, as small as 3 months at a time. So that's the new contracting mechanism coming up. So we stay aligned to our outcomes, and we have enough autonomy at the output level, and we keep building one over the other. So that's something we are exploring.
Yeah, thanks, Tushar. I completely agree. That the idea of autonomy, and delegating responsibility and allowing people more flexibility in producing and delivering outcomes is absolutely fundamental. And for me, it's actually about a change of mindset as well, isn't it? We've got to change the mindset of how organizations operate, reimagining those old processes that we've rolled out year in, year out, maybe for decades, so that we make change rather than some sort of specific separate activity that occasionally comes round and disrupts everything we do. Make it business as usual.
Correct.
So it's actually part of how we operate. And I think as well, we talked a little bit about contracting processes there, but I think it's more about how to think rather than what to think.
Absolutely.
And I'm also thinking it's more what to do rather than how to do it, less prescriptive. And from somebody who comes from a military background, I think we can reassure people it doesn't mean to say that you lose control. Command and control can still be sustained. In fact, I would say that it even validates the link between strategy and execution, because you're always looking back to it to say, are we doing the right thing? Is it going to achieve the outcomes we want? And that's regularly happening rather than happening every year or 2 years or whatever we're doing.
Correct.
Okay. So I think, if we have that approach, that agile approach, then we can instill things like the culture and the values and the principles that will then drive the right behaviors to deliver success. And of course, that's easier said than done. And I think, yes, on that journey, it all needs to be underpinned, of course, by strong, committed, and dedicated leadership who can drive that change through. And I think if we achieve all of that, then certainly, we're on the road to success.
True that. And I like what you just said, which is it's a mindset or a culture change per se. So when we say that we are working with Singapore Defence System to pilot this new contracting model, actually what is happening using that contracting model, we are actually transforming their mindset and their culture.
Yeah.
So to summarize our conversation, agility is all about moving from rigid controls to collaborative adaptiveness. It is more going from plan to responding to change. It is more about going from control to collaboration, from output to outcomes, right? And the best teams, whether in warfare or whether in enterprises or businesses, are the ones which do not stick to the script or the plan, are flexible enough to change and adapt on the fly. Now, how does this really happen though? What unlocks this adaptability? Actually, we have already spoken about it. To summarize, there are 3 things at least. Number 1 is going from resource utilization to flow utilization. So reduce your utilization percentage. Let the creativity and innovation flow through. Be unstuck first. The second bit we discussed was about having aligned autonomy. Don't go through the approval channels all the way to the top. Have real-time information radiators so that your teams can take decision on the fly by themselves. That's how autonomy is instilled into the system. And the third bit is really about embracing this uncertainty. You cannot know everything upfront, so be prepared for it. In fact, bake the uncertainty in it. Lock in the outcomes, but be flexible with your outputs and activities, and keep checking it every iteration, as small as 2 weeks to as big as probably 3 months, and keep moving forward. How about you? How would you summarize it?
Well, I think when I look back over my experience in defence and I compare it with what I see in Singapore at the moment, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is that for there to be positive change, it's broadly accepted that there sort of needs to be three sort of core elements to that. There needs to be a shared vision. There needs to be urgency in the willingness to deliver, and there needs to be a coalition of like-minded people getting together to deliver those outcomes. And when I look at Singapore, I see that. We have a government here that has the vision, the commitment, and the willingness to invest in transformation in the public sector.
True.
And that's not the case in all nations. And so what we're seeing in defence at the moment, as we've discussed, is the seeds of that transformation beginning to be sown. And in some areas, such as you mentioned on the procurement side, we're beginning to see some of those seeds germinate.
Correct.
And and I hope that over the coming months that we'll see those grow so that they cover the whole ecosystem. And I think that's a fabulous foundation from which to start. You are set fair for success based on that. As to the outcomes that that the transformation will bring for Singapore, I think again we've got three. The first one is and should be that we will have more efficient and effective operational outcomes for defence. That's what really matters. But the second one will be that we'll get more bangs for our dollar. And of course, no government can afford to ignore that. And finally, when we look at the defence workforce, or in fact the Singaporean workforce, many of the problems, the pain points and the frustrations that are perhaps restricting them today, will be released. And hopefully that will mean that our most important asset, our people, have more rewarding careers in defence for the future. And that's got to be a good thing.
Absolutely.
So, that's a really positive message.
Correct.
I think it's one that everybody can get behind. And, it's a great opportunity for us and a privilege for us in Teamers to be part of that, and to be working and helping Singapore on that journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah.